I was happy to hear this mountain story that we just heard the deacon proclaim about the Transfiguration, because since 2012 I started working for Food for the Poor, and so some of you know that I do a lot of traveling across the United States, and the reason why I look so rested is because I'm retired. But about 3 times, I think, in the last 6 weeks or so, I've had assignments out in Colorado. And sometimes I wonder if we haven't been cheated a little bit because we don't have those beautiful mountains. I remember one morning, very early, it was a very cold morning, bitter cold, and we were driving to Durango so I could catch a flight home. And there in front of us were the beautiful Rocky Mountains, all snow-capped with these gorgeous pinks and oranges. It was early morning, and the cold and this spectacular color. And I thought, boy, this might be great, just stay there. But alas, I had to come home, back to reality, as it is for all of us. I mention that because there is some of that going on, it seems to me, in this account of the Transfiguration this morning. That I Googled Mount Tabor yesterday, and I discovered that it's 1,843 feet at the summit. Pikes Peak was about 14,114 feet at its summit. And yet we cannot help but notice in the gospel reading for this weekend that the disciples, after they see this vision of the Lord transfigured, they want to just stay there. You know, Peter says, let's build some tents. We'll put up a few tents, pitch our tents. In other words, we're just going to stay here for a while and enjoy this. And the Lord has to kind of put them straight, doesn't he? You know, he kind of very quickly responds to that request to pitch a few tents by suggesting to them that they accompany him back down the mountain and back into real life. I think at times you and I want to just kind of maybe pitch our tents and remove ourselves from all of the problems of daily life. The situation of this particular gospel story in St. Luke's version, which we're reading this year, as you know, occurs right before Jesus begins his bitter passion and death. So it's placed in the gospel to kind of as a means of strengthening these disciples, Peter, James, and John, for what they are about to experience as they see their beloved Lord and Master undergo the horrific suffering of his passion and death. So what these disciples experience here this day on Mount Tabor is inner peace, a sense of tranquility, a spirit of freedom, a sense of freedom from all of their problems. Seems like a couple of very good reasons to stay for a while. They simply did not want to let go of this experience. But as we see, Jesus had other plans for them, as he often does for us as well. They had a lot of work to do before it was all over, and they could experience this glorified Lord forever. But this memory of what they experienced on Mount Tabor would sustain them in some of their darkest moments. I think that a lesson that those disciples had to learn in coming back down the mountain is probably similar to what we experience at times. A lesson that the disciples had to learn in their daily lives, and we do as well, is that our daily lives are really the testing ground for the spiritual life. I suspect that many of you have or are going through some tough times in your personal lives. This is the stuff, however, of spiritual maturity and growth. It's a basic principle of the spiritual life is that God always meets us where we are. Where we are. Look at Abraham in the first reading. He's an old man to whom a promise has been made that he would be the father of a great generation. As numerous as the stars in the sky would be his offspring. And yet the reality is that Abraham will never live to see the fulfillment of those promises. All he could do was to put his faith and his trust on what God spoke to him. I think the big temptation for us at times might be to turn away from the drudgery of daily life and to focus maybe too much on the world to come. We forget that daily life is the proving ground for our spiritual life in whatever form it takes and wherever it happens in our life. Glory, yes, is our final destiny, the end of our spiritual path, but it is in and through the journey here that we arrive there. You know, the social media has a way, doesn't it, of sugarcoating everything in life. You never get on Facebook and see, or frequently, you don't hear people's problems on Facebook. Everything it's a constant stream of happiness and joy, of magical moments and constant achievements. And yet, real life is not like that, is it? Real life is about, what? Changing the diapers, or running these kids constantly to sports and, running this taxi service at home for the kids, making the coffee, shoveling the driveway, getting your taxes ready, whatever it might be, commuting to work, and on and on. And you know something? Those are the very places where we find God. We too are on a journey, all of us. There are moments of joy, moments of laughter, moments of insight, as well as pain and loss. But all of those things together are important because they are the stuff of our spiritual life, spiritual maturity. There is no pristine spiritual path here on earth. Just the constant living of our lives in the realms of the sacred and the mundane as we prepare for our heavenly home. They may not have wanted to, Peter, James, and John, they might not have wanted to come down from that mountain with Jesus, but they quickly find themselves back in the messiness of life. The mountain was but a glimpse of what would come for them. And like the disciples, we too must walk that same road that Jesus walked.